My daughter mocked me for being too old. I smiled, then gave the house to my caretaker instead. The candlelight flickers across my daughter's face as she leans in toward her friends. I sit just a few feet away, still in the room, still holding the cake knife. They think I can't hear. Maybe they don't care if I do. She's so old-fashioned. Like literally old, my daughter says, followed by a burst of laughter from the group of women around her. I blink slowly, pretending I didn't hear, pretending it doesn't matter. But it does. My name is Evelyn, and I turned 60 today. I live just outside Eugene, Oregon. A quiet street. A 2-story home I once filled with Barbie shoes and ballet slippers. My daughter, my only child, was the axis around which I built my world. Her father passed away when she was barely 5. Since then, it's been the two of us: birthdays, scraped knees, prom nights, and college applications. But today, she gave me a card signed with a generic "love you" and a forced hug, before retreating to the other side of the room to sip wine and laugh with her friends. I stand in the doorway holding the cake knife, watching as my daughter leans her elbow on the kitchen counter like it's hers. She doesn't notice I'm still there. I take one slow step backward, then another, retreating up the stairs. The hallway light glows dim, as if even the house itself is too tired to offer comfort. In my room, I close the door without a sound and sit on the edge of the bed. The laughter downstairs continues, muffled but sharp. I stare at the family photo on the wall, me younger, holding my daughter in my lap on the front porch. That was the summer she lost her first tooth. We both look so happy. A slow ache spreads through my chest. Not sharp, not loud, just persistent. Like water leaking through a foundation. Not enough to drown you, just enough to let you know the structure is crumbling. I lie back against the pillows, trying to remember the last time she really looked at me. Really saw me. The day had started quietly. I woke up to silence. No breakfast tray. No card slipped under my door. No knock. No hug. I told myself she was busy, tired, distracted. The way I used to be when I worked full-time and still made every science fair and piano recital. I let it go. I always let it go. When she finally woke up late in the morning, she tossed a casual happy birthday my way on her way to the fridge. That was it. I laughed it off. I said 60 isn't what it used to be. She didn't reply. I made my own breakfast, toasted my own bagel, lit my own candle. And now here I am, alone in a room filled with things I once saved for her: quilted blankets, old keepsakes, her father's watch. All of it meant for her. For a future I assumed would always be shared. I hear footsteps in the hallway and sit up. The door creaks open. It's Marisol. She gives me a soft smile. Not the kind people use when they pity you. The kind that says, "I noticed." "Everything okay?" she asks. Her accent is gentle. Her voice always kind. "I'm fine," I say. "Just tired." She doesn't push. She just steps inside, closes the door behind her, and sits in the chair near the window. "I saved you a slice," she says after a moment. "From the cake." I nod. "Thanks." The two of us sit in silence for a while. I watch the way the wind bends the branches outside, how the leaves dance even without anyone watching. How nice it must be to just exist without needing permission. Marisol shifts slightly. "My son asked me today why I always come home smiling after being here." I look over at her. "What did you tell him?" She smiles again, small. "That you remind me of my mother, before she passed." The ache in my chest warms for a second, not because I'm happy, but because I remember what it was like to be needed. That night after she leaves, I brush my teeth, take off my earrings, and fold back the covers. I don't cry. I just lie there, staring at the ceiling, asking myself a question I can't answer. What happens when your child stops loving you? Or maybe never did? If you were in my shoes, how would you handle it? The next morning, I linger longer than usual in bed, my fingers absently tracing the fabric of the old comforter I stitched when my daughter was still in high school. Little faded squares of her childhood clothes, a pink dress she wore to a birthday party, a flannel shirt from our last trip to the coast, even a corner of the baby blanket she once dragged through every room of this house. It used to be easier to get up, easier to smile. Now I wake to a heavy stillness that clings to the air like humidity. Eventually, I rise and pad barefoot through the house. My bones ache a little more than they used to, but I move quietly, slowly. This is still my kingdom. I touch the banister as I descend the stairs, my hand landing instinctively on the same worn spot it always has. The wood is smooth from years of habit. This house was built in the 1960s. Nothing fancy. 2 stories wide windows chipped paint along the edges of the porch. I remember when we first bought it. My husband and I were young and poor, but hopeful. He looked at me in the living room and said, "It's not much now, but we'll fill it with love." And we did. Every room tells a story. In the kitchen, there's a faint stain on the linoleum where my daughter dropped an entire jar of grape jelly during one of her tantrums. She was 5, and I'd refused to let her watch cartoons before dinner. I made her clean it up, and she cried the whole time. But later that night, she climbed into bed with me and whispered, "Sorry, Mommy," and we fell asleep holding hands. In the dining room, the table still has a little scratch near the edge from where she tried to carve her initials with a plastic fork. She was 7. I was furious at the time, but now I run my fingers over the indentation and feel strangely grateful it's still there. In the hallway, framed photographs line the wall like a timeline of all the love I poured into this life. Birthdays, graduations, first days of school. I used to change them out every year. Now they sit still unchanged, as if the house is preserving a time when I was needed. I stop in front of one particular photo, my daughter's senior prom. Her hair pinned up with baby's breath, her eyes sparkling. I remember the hours I spent helping her get ready, steaming her dress, curling her hair just right. She'd barely said thank you then too, but I didn't care. Love wasn't about being thanked. It was about giving, but lately I wonder if I gave too much. What happens when you give, and the person on the other end forgets they were ever receiving? The living room is still scattered with remnants of last night empty wine glasses, napkins, crumbs. My daughter is nowhere in sight. I imagine she's still asleep or out with her friends. I start cleaning up more out of instinct than obligation. It's what I've always done. I stack the glasses, wipe down the counters, even take the trash out before the truck comes by. My slippers crunch slightly on broken tortilla chips as I move. As I wash the last glass, the front door opens. She walks in, phone in hand, hair tied up in a messy bun. She sees me but barely acknowledges it. "Hey," she says, distracted. "Thanks for handling the cleanup." I nod but don't respond. She plops onto the couch and scrolls her phone. "I'm thinking of turning the guest room into a yoga space," she says casually, not looking up. I saw this TikTok about calming colors and like energy flow. I stare at her, waiting for a pause. There isn't one. "The guest room," I say slowly. "Yeah, like... it's just kind of wasted space, you know? I could use it for my classes. People pay more if they think you're all zen and spiritual." I want to say, "That's where your father's books still are. That's where I sit every evening and read. That's where I keep the quilt I made when you were born." But I say nothing, because what's the point? "I'll buy some incense," she adds. She leaves the room without waiting for my input. I sit on the couch for a long while after that, staring out the window. A bluebird lands on the feeder I hung last spring. He pecks once, then twice, then flies away. Even the birds don't stay long here anymore. I think about how many years I've spent in these walls. How many versions of myself I've become: wife, widow, mother, teacher, cook, nurse, mediator. And now just background. I hear the soft hum of the vacuum upstairs. Marisol must be here. She always arrives on Fridays to clean, help with groceries, and bring a small container of tamales from her kitchen. She never comes empty-handed. Never empty-hearted either. As the vacuum clicks off, I hear her light footsteps descending. She sees me sitting quietly and says, "Would you like some tea? I just put water on the stove." I nod. When she hands me the mug, her hands are warm, her nails short and clean. I glance up at her. "Do you ever feel like you're disappearing?" I ask. She looks at me for a moment, then sits beside me. Sometimes she says honestly. But then someone reminds me I'm still here. I wrap my fingers around the mug and let the steam rise into my face. I close my eyes. I think of the memories pressed into these walls, the kind that can't be painted over. And for the first time, I wonder if my daughter doesn't want this house. Maybe someone else should have it. Someone who would remember the echoes in the floorboards and the love stitched into the curtains. If you were me, would you hold on or start letting go? Marisol doesn't ask questions, not the intrusive kind anyway. Her kindness isn't loud. It doesn't draw attention to itself. It arrives like a whisper, soft and steady exactly when I need it. She comes by twice a week now, though I suspect she comes more for me than the paycheck. She says her son's after-school program gives her a few free hours, and I've never questioned it. But I see the way she lingers after vacuuming, how she folds the same throw blanket twice before finally placing it down. She sees me in the way my own daughter no longer does. Today she brings me chicken soup still warm in a thermos. For your joints, she says. It's the turmeric. I sit at the kitchen table watching her as she moves about. Her motions are so familiar now that I sometimes forget what the house felt like before she became a part of it. You don't have to keep bringing food, I say gently. I know, she replies, smiling. But you never say no to it. She sets the bowl down in front of me. I don't say no this time either. Across from me, the seat where my daughter used to sit during our long Sunday breakfasts remains untouched. She used to twirl her hair around her finger as she chattered about her week. Now she barely sits at all. I gesture toward the empty chair. You know, she used to tell me everything. Marisol sits down across from me. What happened? I think for a long moment. I think she outgrew me. Or maybe I just stopped being convenient. Marisol's eyes soften. I don't think we outgrow our mothers. I think we forget we needed them once. That hits harder than I expected. I swallow and nod, unsure of how to reply. Your daughter, I say, shifting the conversation, has she ever been cruel? She thinks about it. No, but she's still young, only 14. I see it in her sometimes, a sharpness like a match waiting to strike. But when I look at her, I remind myself she's still learning, and I'm still teaching. I nod again, a little ashamed of my own daughter's sharpness, my failure to dull it. You're a good mother. She smiles, but it's sad this time. Sometimes I wonder if she'll see that. Maybe not until I'm gone. The words hang between us. I stir my soup slowly, the silence stretching comfortably now like a blanket we both understand. Later that afternoon, I watch Marisol from the window as she walks back down the driveway, her small grocery tote swinging gently at her side. She glances back once and waves. I raise my hand, then let it drop to the windowsill. The contrast between her and my daughter is becoming sharper each week. When Marisol enters a room, I feel seen. When my daughter enters, I feel judged, or worse, ignored. That evening, my daughter comes home, late eyeliner smudged and keys jingling like bells in her overstuffed purse. I did. She notices the dishes drying in the rack. Oh. Marisol again. I nod. She made soup. A pause. Then, you know, it's weird how close you two are. She's just the help. My heart goes still in my chest. She says it so casually, as if she's commenting on the weather. I take a deep breath. Then another. I don't respond, not because I agree, but because I'm afraid of what I might say if I do. Anyway, she continues flopping onto the couch. I need you to move your stuff out of the front hall closet. I'm thinking of turning it into a linen space. It's so cluttered. My stuff. Yeah, all your coats and like whatever else is in there. It just looks messy. She doesn't look up from her phone. I stare at her. I wonder how we got here. I wonder when the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest became someone who sees me as an obstacle. I nod once. Okay. She doesn't thank me. She just starts scrolling through Instagram. I stand quietly, walk down the hall, and open the closet. My coats, yes. But also the baby carrier I used to lug her around in. A shoebox filled with her elementary school artwork. her father's winter scarf still faintly smelling of cedar. Clutter, she said. I close the closet gently and step back. I don't cry. I'm long past tears now. But something else cracks small and nearly invisible like a hairline fracture in old porcelain. The next morning I call Marisol. Would your son like to come by after school, I ask. I found an old chess set in the attic. I thought he might like it. There's a pause. He'd love that. I hang up, already pulling out snacks. Already feeling lighter. If someone had told me a year ago that my daughter would start treating me like I'm in the way, I would have laughed it off. But now I see it clearly. And if someone had told me that the person I would look forward to seeing most would be a part-time caretaker, and her son, I would have believed it. Because the ones who choose to be in your life, even when they don't have to, are the ones worth holding on to. If you were me, would you try to fix what's broken or protect the parts of yourself still whole? It starts to happen more often. The little jabs, the eye rolls, the thinly veiled jokes at my expense. My daughter seems to have made a habit of laughing at me lately like I'm the punchline to some private joke she thinks the world should be in on. I try to brush it off the first few times. Everyone gets annoyed with their parents, right? I tell myself she's just stressed. She's busy. Maybe I'm too sensitive, but the jokes don't stop. In fact, they become more pointed, more public. It begins at the grocery store one Saturday afternoon. We're standing at the checkout when I struggle to find my debit card. I fumble through my wallet, hands shaking slightly, my reading glasses perched uselessly on my head. My daughter laughs and says loud enough for the cashier and the people behind us to hear. Sorry, she's ancient. Takes her a minute to remember where she is. I freeze. The cashier gives a tight, uncomfortable smile. The young man bagging our groceries glances away. I don't say anything. I just hand over the card when I finally find it and pay. Later in the car, I muster the courage to say that wasn't kind. She shrugs. Oh, come on, it was a joke. Lighten up. That's her favorite phrase lately. Lighten up. As if the weight I carry every day is something I can just set down on the curb and walk away from. I turn my face toward the window and don't say anything else. Another time we're at dinner with a few of her friends, young professionals in their 30s. She introduces me as my mom who refuses to learn how to use a smartphone, so be patient if she asks you what an app is. Her friends laugh, and I force a smile even though it curls awkwardly in my chest like something foreign. One of the women says, "Oh my God, that's so cute." My mom still has a flip phone too. My daughter replies, "Yeah, but at least your mom doesn't think TikTok is a kind of clock." More laughter. I excuse myself to the restroom and sit in a stall for 5 minutes, breathing slowly, letting the sting settle. When I return, no one notices. The conversation has already moved on. These aren't just throwaway comments. They're barbs. And they come more freely now, like she's testing how far she can go before I break. She even rolls her eyes when I speak sometimes, as if I'm too slow, too emotional, too everything. I begin to say less. I move more carefully, speak more gently, as if walking through a room filled with glass. I think back to the days when she was little, and I cheered her through every piano recital, every math test, every breakup. I never made her feel small. I never laughed at her. I caught her tears, held her secrets, whispered kindness into her heart, even when she slammed doors and screamed that she hated me. Now she makes fun of my clothes, the way I walk, my weird attachment to physical books. One night I hear her on the phone with a friend. She doesn't know I'm standing in the hallway. She's just stuck in time, you know, like some old movie that nobody watches anymore. She laughs. I stand there for a long moment, hand resting on the door frame. I wonder how long she's felt this way. I wonder if she realizes that all her cruelty sits like a paperweight on my chest every night when I try to sleep. Marisol notices. The next morning, as she's folding towels, she glances over at me. You look sad today. I try to deflect. Just tired. She doesn't buy it. You want to talk about it? No, I whisper. Not yet. She nods, not pushing. But she doesn't look away either. Her presence feels like a thread holding me together, a gentle tether back to the parts of myself that aren't worn down to silence. Later that week, Marisol's son comes by again. He's shy at first, but he warms up quickly. He's bright, curious, and polite with eyes that search for approval. We bake together something I haven't done in ages. He cracks the eggs too fast and flour ends up in his hair, but I laugh. Genuinely. The kind that wrinkles the eyes. The kind I thought I had lost. Marisol takes a photo of us at the counter, and when she shows it to me, I hardly recognize myself. I look alive. Meanwhile, my daughter comes home late again. She walks into the kitchen, sees the mess, and frowns. Really baking, who's going to clean this? Don't worry, I say. We've got it. She looks between me and the boy like we're an inconvenience in her space. Whatever she mutters and leaves the room. It's strange. I used to long for her presence. Now I feel relief when she walks away. I wonder when love started to feel like walking barefoot through broken glass. If you were me, would you keep trying to reach for her through the shards? Or let your hand heal? There's a particular kind of silence that follows you when you live in a house with someone who no longer sees you. It's not like being alone. No, being alone can be peaceful. This silence is cold, hollow, like walking into a room and realizing you've become invisible in it. My daughter barely speaks to me anymore unless she wants something. She taps through her phone when I talk. She answers in single words. Sometimes she doesn't answer at all. I used to count the days until she'd come home for a visit. Now I count how many times she passes me in a day without looking up. I try to keep the rhythms of our old life alive, Sunday breakfast, movie night, little notes with her coffee cup. But they are received like dust on the furniture. She brushes them aside without noticing. One morning I make her favorite scrambled eggs with chives and cheese toast with almond butter and strong coffee, just the way she used to like it. I arrange it on the table and sit down waiting. I imagine her walking in surprise, touched, maybe even grateful. She comes in 20 minutes later, AirPods in her eyes, on her phone. She glances at the food. Not hungry, she mumbles and walks past me. I sit alone, the eggs cooling in front of me. The coffee goes bitter in the pot. That night I hear her laughing in her room with someone on the phone. She hasn't laughed like that with me in years. I don't want to admit it, but I've started to shrink myself. I tiptoe through my own home, careful not to be in her way. I stop watching the news when she's in the room. I lower the volume on my life. I become quieter, smaller. I suppose it's easier to disappear than to be hurt. I stop bringing up the past. She hates when I do. Mom, can we not talk about Dad every time something happens? She snapped once when I mentioned how he used to hum while fixing the garage door. I said nothing. But the image of him, oil on his fingers and laughter in his eyes, stayed with me long after she left the room. Sometimes I wonder if she even remembers the man who used to carry her on his shoulders, or the woman who stayed up nights helping her through her math anxiety, or the way I held her when she cried over her first heartbreak. Now I'm the woman she asks to move the laundry so she can use the dryer. I'm the woman who picks up after her. I'm the woman who's just too much sometimes. One night I overhear her telling a friend, I can't wait until I get my own place. She's always there. It's suffocating. That word suffocating clings to me like fog. I want to knock on her door and scream, I gave you breath when you didn't know how to breathe. I gave you this life. But I don't. Instead, I go back to my room and lie in the dark. I think about how it feels to be needed for decades, and then suddenly discarded. Like a coat that no longer fits. Marisol comes the next day. She finds me in the backyard clipping dead roses from the bush near the fence. You're quiet, she says. Maybe I'm finally learning, I say. She doesn't ask what I mean. She walks over, takes the clippers from my hand, and finishes the bush for me. Later inside, she brings me a small envelope. It's nothing, she says quickly. My son made you a card. I open it. Crayon scribbles. A lopsided flower. It says in thick letters, "Thank you for being nice to me." I blink hard and turn away, pressing my lips together. He said you smell like cookies and stories, Marisol adds, laughing softly. I hang the card on the fridge beside the empty space where my daughter's childhood drawings used to be. That evening, I set 2 plates for dinner, one for me, one for no one. A habit. A hope. She doesn't come down to eat. The plate gets cold. So I make tea instead. I sip it slowly, breathing in the steam. I think about the kind of mother I've been, the kind of woman I still am. I think about what happens when the person you gave everything to forgets you're still giving. If you were me, would you keep setting 2 plates? Or finally learn to eat alone? It was just dinner. A simple, silly thing. A Wednesday night, 2 plates of pasta, soft music playing from my old stereo in the corner. I'd made the sauce from scratch, just like her father used to love it. I even pulled out the linen napkins, the ones with tiny embroidered leaves, because something in me still clung to the illusion that maybe tonight would be different. She was late as usual. I kept the food warm on the stove. I waited. When she finally came through the door, her heels clicking across the hardwood, I smiled and said, "Perfect timing. I just finished." She didn't look up from her phone. "Sorry, I already ate." My smile faltered. "Oh." She walked to the fridge, pulled out a can of soda, and leaned against the counter, scrolling. "I made your favorite." I tried my voice small. "With the crushed red pepper you like." She didn't even look at the table. "I told you I was grabbing dinner with Sophie." "You never listen." My chest tightened. "You didn't tell me." She sighed like I was a weight on her shoulders. "You must have forgotten." "It's fine." It wasn't fine. I sat down at the table, slowly, hands in my lap. The pasta stared back at me. The napkins suddenly looked foolish. I tried to say something, to reach for the thread between us, but she was already walking away, calling out over her shoulder, "Please don't leave a mess in the sink. I'm cleaning tomorrow." That was it. That was the moment. I stared at my plate, then rose slowly from the chair. I walked to the bathroom, closed the door behind me, and pressed the towel to my face, not to wipe away tears, but to smother the sound of my sobs. I hadn't cried in front of her in years. I didn't want her to hear now. I sat on the edge of the tub, towel clutched to my chest like armor, and asked the question that had been knocking at the edge of my thoughts for weeks now. How did we get here? I stayed in that bathroom for 20 minutes. Maybe more. When I finally emerged, the house was quiet again. She had retreated to her room, door closed, headphones in. The pasta was cold. The candles had burned down low. I blew them out one by one, the smell of wax and disappointment lingering in the air. That night in bed, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above me. I thought of all the ways I'd tried to hold us together, the Sunday pancakes, the birthday surprises, the endless forgiving. I thought about the way she used to crawl into bed beside me, whispering her little fears into the dark. And I thought about how far she'd gone, even though her bedroom was just down the hall. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, Marisol found me outside again, watering the garden. "You look tired," she said, placing a gentle hand on my arm. "I am," I whispered. She didn't ask why. She simply stood beside me as we watched the morning sunlight spill across the lawn. "I used to love this house," I said after a while. Marisol glanced at me. "And now it feels like it's grieving something I can't name." She was quiet for a moment. "Then maybe it's grieving you." The words hit hard, like they'd been waiting for someone to say them. Later that afternoon, I wandered the halls. I looked at every photo, every crack in the wall, every drawer handle I had replaced myself. I stood in the guest room, now half empty, as my daughter had begun moving boxes in for her so-called yoga studio. The bookshelf had been pushed against the wall, the reading chair shoved into the closet. I sat on the bed, hands folded. This house, this life, it had all been built with the idea that she would one day treasure it. And now I wasn't even allowed a corner. That evening, I found her in the living room, legs curled under her laptop open. "I wanted to talk," I said gently. She didn't look up. "Can it wait?" "No." She looked annoyed. "Okay, what?" I swallowed. "I feel like you don't see me anymore. Like I've become something you tolerate instead of someone you love." Her eyes narrowed. "God, are we doing this again? You're always so dramatic." "I'm not trying to fight," I said quietly. "I'm trying to understand. I miss you." She scoffed. "Maybe if you weren't always acting like a victim, people wouldn't walk away." The air left my lungs. I nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me how you really feel." She rolled her eyes. "Don't twist my words." But I wasn't twisting anything. I was hearing her. truly hearing her for the first time in a long time. And I think she knew too that something had shifted. I left the room. I didn't cry this time, because something inside me had finally gone quiet. A soft click like a door closing. If you were me, how long would you stay in a place where love no longer lives? The next morning, I woke up not to silence but to purpose. A quiet buzz inside me like something had stirred after lying dormant far too long. Marisol had asked if her son could come by again to study for a history quiz. I said yes before she finished the question. I prepared the little nook in the kitchen, set out extra pencils, even found an old atlas I used to use when tutoring students years ago. My hands moved on their own, energized, certain. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drifting. He arrived with a backpack almost as big as his frame, his dark hair messy and his eyes wide with shyness. I knelt beside him at the table and opened his workbook, and as we went over each chapter, I watched his face light up every time he got an answer right. He reminded me of my daughter when she was 8, back when she still reached for my hand when she got stuck on a hard word. Back before pride took the place of tenderness. After we finished, he helped me make lemonade. His laugh rang through the kitchen like music. I glanced up and saw Marisol watching us from the hallway, one hand over her heart. She didn't say anything, just smiled. When they left later that afternoon, the boy hugged me, arms flung tight around my middle. "You're smart," he said, like my abuela was. That simple sentence made something in my chest unlock. That night I didn't set 2 plates. I set 3. One for myself, one for a guest, and one for possibility. I started thinking in terms of giving again, not in the way I used to give to my daughter, always hoping for love in return, but giving because someone needed it, not expected it, not demanded it, just needed it. The next week I invited them again. We baked, we read. I showed him how to press flowers between books. He told me he wanted to be an artist. I promised to find him a sketch pad from the storage boxes in the garage. I began to organize the garage after that, 1 box at a time. My fingers unwrapped forgotten memories, paint sets, glitter pens, old trophies, even the stuffed giraffe my daughter once refused to sleep without. I held it for a moment, brushing the worn fabric with my thumb, then placed it gently back into the box. As I stacked the cartons, I realized how much I'd been preserving a life for someone who had already moved on from it. I began walking more. The mornings were still crisp in Oregon, but I didn't mind. I'd walk to the park 3 blocks away, sit on the bench near the duck pond, and watch the world carry on. Sometimes I'd see young mothers juggling toddlers and grocery bags, their eyes exhausted but full. Other times, older couples with folded hands between them. Life kept going no matter who looked away. One of those mornings, I brought the sketch pad I had found. When Marisol's son arrived the next day, I handed it to him. His hands trembled as he took it. "You didn't have to," Marisol said softly. "I know," I replied, "but I wanted to." She studied me for a long moment. "Why?" And I answered with a truth that came out of me like breath, because it feels good to be useful again. But with Marisol's son, I was a guide, a teacher, a warm place to land. My daughter noticed. One evening, she walked into the kitchen while I was preparing chicken soup. "You're really going out of your way for her kid, huh?" she said, not looking up from her phone. I kept stirring. "He's a sweet boy." She leaned against the counter. "You're not his grandma." "No," I said evenly. "But I can be something kind." She scoffed. "That's weird." I didn't argue. I let the silence answer for me. She left the room a few moments later, mumbling something about needing to order sushi. And I stayed, stirring slowly, smiling to myself. I used to define motherhood by how much I could give my daughter. I still do in part. But I'm starting to learn that mothering is also about choosing where your care goes. Choosing where love is safe. Where it lands gently and grows. I'm still her mother. But I'm also something else now. A woman reclaiming her worth. A woman learning that being useful doesn't mean being used. If you were me, would you cling to the daughter who takes you for granted, or embrace the people who treat your love like a gift? It began as all real change does, with a question I couldn't ignore. One morning while folding laundry, I looked up and whispered aloud to no one, "If I died tomorrow, who would cry because I'm gone and who would just be inconvenienced?" The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. That night I sat at the kitchen table and wrote down a list. 2 columns. On one side, what I have. On the other, who appreciates it. The second column was thin. Painfully so. The house was at the top of the first list. This house, my home for over 3 decades, wasn't just property. It was the sum of my sacrifices. Every corner spoke of me. Every wall held echoes of lullabies and whispered prayers. It wasn't 4 walls and a roof. It was history. But history, I was realizing, only mattered if someone wanted to carry it forward. My daughter treated it like a waiting room. A place to stage her life until something better came along. She had already started reimagining it as hers, talking about repainting, renting out the garage, remodeling the master bathroom once it's mine. Once, as if it were inevitable. But nothing in life is inevitable. Not love. Not loyalty. And certainly not inheritance. The next day I called my attorney. Her name is Denise. We'd met years ago when I updated my will after my husband passed. I hadn't spoken to her in over a decade, but when I explained my situation, she didn't sound surprised. Just calm. Efficient. Like she'd heard this kind of heartbreak before. We met in her small office near downtown. I wore a soft green sweater and put on lipstick for the first time in weeks. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted to remember that I mattered. "I'd like to update my will," I told her. She looked over her glasses. "And who are the new beneficiaries?" I paused, took a breath. "My caretaker. And her son." There was a small silence. Not judgment, just surprise. "Do you want to disinherit your daughter entirely?" That word felt harsh. But wasn't it fitting? "No," I said. "I'll leave her something small, something symbolic. But the house goes to someone who sees it, who needs it, who would love it." Denise nodded. "We can make that happen." As I signed the preliminary forms, a strange calm settled in my bones. Like I had been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. On my walk home, the air felt different, lighter. The sun filtered through the branches in that golden, late-afternoon way that makes everything seem touched by magic. I walked slower, let myself feel it. Every day after that, I took longer walks. I walked down streets I hadn't visited in years. I passed the elementary school where I once waited in the pickup line, waving at my daughter with a juice box in hand. I walked by the bookstore where I bought her first copy of Little Women. The window display had changed, but the bell above the door still jingled the same. Sometimes I stopped in, bought a used book, and tucked it into my bag like a secret. I began a habit writing in the margins of whatever I was reading. Thoughts, little moments. Nothing poetic, just mine. And at night, when I returned home, I began packing, not to leave, but to organize my legacy. I packed up the things I wanted to give away. The quilts, the photo albums, the necklace my husband gave me the night before our daughter was born. I labeled boxes with soft pencil strokes for Marisol, for her son, for someone who needs a story. My daughter didn't notice. Or if she didn't ask. She came and went talking about job interviews and sushi orders, and how TikTok ruined attention spans. She hardly looked at the shifting furniture, the boxes lining the hallway, the files neatly stacked on the counter, until one afternoon she paused and said, "Are you getting rid of things?" "Some," I answered. "Why?" "Just making room." She shrugged. "Well, if you're purging anything good, let me know." She didn't ask what was in the boxes. She didn't ask why now. I did not offer. I began making a new list. Not of possessions, but of people. People who had shown up. People who had asked, "How are you really?" and waited for the answer. The list was short, but every name on it mattered, and Marisol was at the top. I told her about the lawyer, about the changes. She was stunned. "You can't... I don't expect that. I just want to help." I took her hand across the table. "And that's exactly why. Tears filled her eyes. She tried to say something but couldn't. "Promise me one thing," I whispered. "That you'll remember this place wasn't just a house. It was love and drywall and paint." She nodded. "It was done. It was quiet. It was mine. If you were me, would you feel guilty for choosing someone who truly saw you? Or relieved that finally you did?" It wasn't long before the tension ripened into confrontation. It was a Sunday morning, the kind that once meant pancakes and syrup-slicked plates in pajamas. Now my daughter sat across from me at the kitchen table, legs crossed, coffee in one hand, her phone in the other. Sunlight streamed through the windows, but it didn't warm the space between us. She had been unusually quiet that morning. No snarky comments, no side glances. Just silence, the kind that settles in like smoke before a fire. "Can we talk?" she asked abruptly, placing her phone face down for once. I nodded. She looked up at me straight in the eyes and said, "Are you dying?" I blinked. "No. Why?" She crossed her arms. "You're acting weird. You've been going through closets, packing boxes, giving stuff away. And I found a letter from a lawyer on the counter. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. "I'm just preparing, getting things in order." Her eyes narrowed. "Preparing for what?" "For the future." She scoffed. "Are you seriously rewriting your will without even talking to me?" I stared at her. "You never asked." She sat back, folding her arms tighter. I assumed I didn't need to. "You're my mom. You always said the house would be mine one day. That was before I realized you don't want it. You want space. You want freedom. You've made that clear." "That's not the point," she snapped. "I've earned this. I've put up with." She stopped herself, but the damage was done. "Put up with," I repeated, my voice soft. She faltered but pushed on. "You know what I mean. I've been here. I've done my time. I moved back in to help you." "To help me?" I said, disbelief blooming in my chest. "Is that what this has been, Charity?" She rolled her eyes. "You're twisting everything again." "I just thought after everything I've done for you." "You mean after everything I've done for you," I said, and my voice cracked not in anger but in something deeper, something raw. "I gave you this life. I gave you everything." She stood, her coffee forgotten. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own daughter." I stood too, my hands trembling slightly. "And I can't believe you still think everything I have belongs to you just because you exist." She flinched but recovered quickly. "I'm your only child. That doesn't mean you're entitled to my soul." The words surprised even me, but once spoken they rang like a bell through the kitchen. Clear. Unapologetic. She stared at me, silent now. I let the stillness stretch. Then I said, I asked myself who would carry this house forward with love. "You've made it very clear you don't want anything to do with my past. You don't even like being here. Why would I leave it to you?" Her lips tightened. "Because it's what's fair." "No," I said. "Fair would have been being seen, heard, treated like more than a relic in your way." She said nothing. I sat back down, suddenly tired. The will is changed. The house will go to someone who's shown me more kindness in 6 months than you have in 6 years. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "You're going to regret this." I looked up at her. "Maybe. But I already regret spending so many years waiting for your love." Her face flushed, rage, guilt, disbelief, all jostling for space. She turned on her heel and stormed out. I didn't go after her. Instead, I poured myself another cup of coffee and walked out to the porch. The morning air was cool and fragrant with the scent of jasmine. A bird landed on the railing, fluffed its feathers, and flew off again. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like crying after a conversation with my daughter. I felt honest. Tired, yes, but not ashamed. That night, Marisol came by with a container of arroz con pollo. She saw my face and said nothing, just hugged me. Over dinner, I told her what had happened. She didn't offer advice. She just listened, eyes wide, hands warm. "She was raised with so much love," I whispered. "I don't understand what happened." Marisol reached across the table and held my hand. "Sometimes," she said gently, "children grow roots in love and still grow away from it. The thought broke something in me but also healed a part. Later I sat alone in my room, letter in hand. It was the one I had begun writing weeks ago, addressed to my daughter to be read when I'm gone. I unfolded it, smoothed out the creases, and read it again. The ink still felt fresh, the pain still sharp. But now I wondered, should I wait until I'm gone to be honest? Or should I let her know now while there's still time? If you were me, would you give her another chance? Or let silence speak what words never could? The days that followed were quiet, not with sorrow, but with peace. A hollowed-out kind of calm, like the space left after a heavy piece of furniture is moved, and the floor beneath it finally breathes. My daughter stopped speaking to me. No texts, no passive-aggressive commentary. She walked past me like a stranger who recognized the shape of me but not the substance. At first it stung. Then, strangely, it didn't. I adjusted quickly. Maybe because the silence wasn't new, it had just been masquerading as noise all along. Instead, I poured myself into the life I was rebuilding with intention, with gentleness, with choice. I saw Marisol and her son more often. They came by after school with little updates. He got a B+ on his history quiz. He painted a tree in art class. He started writing stories. He asked if I'd read them, and I said yes before he finished asking. We started a little tradition: hot chocolate on Thursday afternoons. He'd sit on the kitchen floor while I stirred the pot on the stove, and Marisol would share stories from her childhood in El Paso. There was laughter in the house again. Real laughter, the kind that didn't have to be explained away or weighed down by eye rolls. One afternoon he brought me a picture he drew: the house, me in the garden, and a caption that read, "My second grandma's house." I kept it on the fridge right where the old spelling bee certificates and macaroni crafts from my daughter once hung. Each morning I found new joy in the small things I used to overlook. The steam rising from a fresh mug of tea. The way the sunlight hit the living room rug. The hush just before rain. I started writing again too. Nothing grand. Just small reflections in a spiral notebook I kept by my bedside. I wrote about the seasons, about memories, about the difference between being needed and being wanted. I also wrote a new letter. This one wasn't for my daughter, it was for Marisol. I thanked her not just for her help, but for her presence, her patience, for treating me like a human being with something still to offer, for sharing her son's warmth with me when my own child had grown cold. I left the letter in the same drawer where the revised will now lived, next to a photo of me and my husband at the coast, both of us windblown and laughing. The more time I spent with Marisol and her son, the more I realized what I had been missing. Not just kindness, but participation. Connection. That beautiful exchange where love flows both ways. With my daughter I had poured and poured and poured, but the cup never stayed full. Now it felt like I was receiving. Not in grand gestures, but in consistent, quiet presence, in being asked how I slept, in being shown a drawing with pride, in the way Marisol always offered to carry in the groceries even when her hands were already full. One night I walked into the guest room, what had once been her yoga space, and looked around. The boxes she had moved in remained untouched. The yoga mat still rolled, never used. A dream she hadn't really cared for. Just something to claim space with. I picked up one of the boxes, took it back to her room, and placed it by the door. Then another. And another. She wasn't home that night, and somehow I was grateful for that. I didn't want this to be a fight, just a quiet undoing of a claim that no longer held weight. I reclaimed the guest room, not to make it mine, but to prepare it for someone who needed it. A reading space, maybe. A place for Marisol's son to nap when he stayed too long. A place filled with books and soft light and no judgment. Reclaiming that room felt like reclaiming my voice. That same week I cleared out the attic. In one of the boxes I found a cassette tape, labeled in my late husband's handwriting, to Evelyn. Beach Trip 97. I dusted off the old tape player I'd kept all these years and pressed play. His voice filled the room. "Look at her. She's waving at the seagulls. Ev, she's fearless, just like you." I sat there, tears slipping down my face in complete silence, listening to the past. It wasn't grief. Not this time. It was gratitude, because I remembered who I was before the forgetting began, before the mockery, before the hollow smiles. I was someone's beloved. I was a mother who mattered. I was a woman who could still choose joy. That night I sat on the porch with a blanket and a mug of tea, the stars scattered across the sky like punctuation marks waiting to end a long sentence. My daughter came home late. She didn't say hello, but I didn't mind, because I was no longer waiting for her to see me. I had seen myself again. If you were me, wouldn't you hold tight to the spaces where you feel real, where your laugh isn't dismissed, and your love isn't met with eye rolls? The day itself wasn't unusual. The sky was overcast, the kind of dull gray that makes the morning feel slower than it is. I had just finished sweeping the porch when Marisol arrived with a small bundle of tamales wrapped in a kitchen towel. Her son trailed behind her holding a book he couldn't wait to show me. It felt like any other sweet, quiet afternoon, until the knock came, a firm, fast rhythm against the front door. I opened it to find my daughter standing there, expression tight, lips drawn in a line, eyes flashing. I could tell immediately she knew. I stepped aside. She walked in, brushing past me like wind through a narrow hall. She held a paper in her hand, the corner crumpled where she'd gripped it too hard. Marisol, sensing something heavy, gently ushered her son outside. "We'll be in the backyard," she said softly. The moment the door closed behind them, my daughter spun on me. "You left the house to them." The words came out like venom, like I had committed a betrayal so personal she could barely form it into sound. I didn't answer right away. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady. She followed, raising the paper. "I saw this. Claire's mother works at Carson and Everett. She was the one who saw your name on the file. She told me in passing, Mom, as if I should have already known." I took a sip of water, then set the glass down gently. "You should have," she gaped at me. "You're joking. You can't be serious." "I am. You're giving my house to your caretaker, and her kid, my house." There it was again. That quiet erasure. That belief that my life, my work, my legacy belonged to her by default. "I'm giving it," I said carefully, "to someone who treats me like a person, who listens, who checks on me, who makes me feel like I matter." She laughed, bitter, mocking. "This is because I made a few jokes. You're seriously this sensitive now." I took a deep breath. "This isn't because of one joke. It's because you stopped seeing me. You started treating me like I was obsolete, like I was something in your way." She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, not to scold, but to slow her. "I raised you with everything I had. I gave you a home, love, every piece of myself. And when I started getting older, when I slowed down, you decided I was just in the background." "That's not true," she said, but there was no weight behind the words. I looked her straight in the eyes. "You mocked me for being too old. You've made it clear in every room we've shared you don't respect me. You don't even like me." She stood frozen, the paper still trembling in her hands. "You were supposed to leave it to me," she said finally, as if that were the only thing that mattered. "And you were supposed to love me," I said. "But we don't always get what we're supposed to." She was quiet then. Utterly quiet. A heavy stillness settled into the room. She set the paper on the counter and walked out. I didn't follow her, not this time. I went to the backyard where Marisol's son was sitting cross-legged under the maple tree, drawing again. Marisol looked up when I stepped onto the porch, concern flickering across her face. "She knows," I said simply. Marisol stood. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I replied. She was always going to find out. The truth always finds its way. I sat beside the boy, watching his hands move across the page. "Did something bad happen?" he asked without looking up. "No," I said after a moment. Something good finally became real. He nodded solemnly, like he understood more than he should. Later that evening, I found the paper my daughter had left. I folded it neatly and tucked it into the drawer with the letter I'd written to her, sealed, still unread. I stood at the window for a long time after that, watching dusk settle over the street. I didn't know if she'd come back, and for the first time I didn't feel guilty for not chasing her. If you were me, would you have waited at that door, heart open, hoping she'd say the right thing? Or would you have done what I did? and finally let the silence answer for you. The house was still the kind of stillness that doesn't press on your chest but settles gently in your lap like a cat that's chosen you. I stood in the living room, hands clasped in front of me, staring at the mantel. It was time. I retrieved the envelope from the drawer. Cream-colored thick, the words, "For my daughter when I'm gone," written in my careful script. I held it between my fingers for a long moment before setting it on the mantel. Not because I planned to leave the world tomorrow, but because I was in a way already gone from the place she thought I'd always be, silent, waiting background. The letter had taken weeks to write. I'd rewritten it 4 times. The first draft was angry, the second too soft, the third filled with memories, the fourth honest. In it I told her who I used to be, what I had given, what I had wanted, and how I had come to the heartbreaking realization that I couldn't give her any more of me, not if I wanted to have anything left. I didn't blame her. I simply told her the truth, that love without care is not love at all. That silence from a child can wound deeper than any insult. That there had been a time when I would have given her the world, and now I was giving myself a small corner of peace. I placed the letter carefully right next to the photo of her father holding her on the front porch the summer she learned to ride a bike. In that photo, she's beaming. He's laughing. I'm off camera, but I was there. I'm always there in the background of her memories. Always behind the lens, behind the birthday cakes, behind the Band-Aids, and the bedtime stories. But now I had stepped in front of the lens. I had taken my place in the frame, and I wasn't sorry. She hadn't returned since our last conversation. She didn't call. The air between us had grown colder, like frost creeping over windows still transparent, but slowly thickening. I didn't chase her. Instead, I filled my days with meaning. Not big, grand, sweeping things, but quiet purpose. I taught Marisol's son how to knit. I took him to the museum one Saturday where he clutched my hand during the dinosaur exhibit, like he was still 5. I gave him my husband's old compass, and he promised to never get lost. Marisol watched all of it with gentle eyes, never intruding, always grateful. "You've changed him," she told me one day. "I think he changed me," I replied. We sat together more often in the evenings, folding laundry, watching the news, just existing in comfort. No judgment. No resentment. Only presence. One night she brought me a candle with lavender and vanilla. "Your house smells like peace now," she said with a soft smile. I lit it the next morning and left it flickering on the windowsill. In the hallway, I rearranged the photos. I moved the one of my daughter's graduation not to punish, but to soften the ache. I placed it beside the drawing her son had made of the house. They sat together now, 2 pieces of a story. Both true. Both mine. Sometimes I stared at that photo and wondered where she'd gone. Not physically, but the version of her who used to leave me notes on the bathroom mirror, who used to hug me without needing a reason, who cried into my chest when she didn't get into her first choice college. Is that girl still somewhere inside the woman who had called me dramatic? Who had said she'd earned this house? Maybe, maybe not. The uncertainty used to tear at me. Now I let it be. One morning, as I was watering the succulents on the windowsill, I found a card in the mailbox. No return address. My daughter's handwriting. Inside 3 words. "I don't understand." That was all. No apology. No questions. Just confusion folded into a white envelope. I set it next to the letter on the mantel. She would understand, or she wouldn't. But I wasn't writing to change her anymore. I was writing to be remembered honestly, not as the mother who gave her everything and asked for nothing, but as the woman who finally asked for herself. If you were me, would you leave the door cracked open in case she comes back? Or would you finally lock it and hang a sign that says, "Only love may enter here"? The first photo I posted was of the Pacific Ocean. I hadn't seen it in over a decade, not since my husband was alive. We'd driven down the coast for our anniversary one year, stayed in a cramped little inn with drafty windows and terrible coffee, and watched the waves crash like they were performing just for us. That memory returned to me soft and full as I stood there once more, this time alone, this time older but not lonely. I posted it to a small account I'd made for myself, tucked away from anyone who didn't care to know me anymore. The caption read simply, Still learning how to begin again. No likes from my daughter, no comments. But Marisol sent me 3 heart emojis and a message that said, "You look beautiful. Proud of you." I smiled. Not because I needed the praise, but because I had finally begun to live for something other than her validation. That trip had been my first in years. I booked it on a whim, took the bus, packed too many cardigans, walked barefoot in the sand, bought a sun hat, ate clam chowder at a little diner where the waitress called me honey. No one there knew I was someone's forgotten mother. They just saw a woman sitting by the window reading a book, laughing into her soup. I didn't know how much of myself I had put on hold until I started moving again. After the beach, I started making a list. Places I'd always said I'd see someday. Now I was making someday a real date. The mountains, a vineyard in California, the antique markets up north, a place to ride a train just for the view. Each time I returned home, Marisol and her son would ask for stories. He'd sit at the table, chin in hand, and I'd tell him about sea glass, about redwoods that touched the clouds, about the woman at the train station who gave me a cinnamon roll just because she liked my scarf. They listened like I mattered, because I did. Meanwhile, the house changed with me. I repainted the guest room. Soft blues and sage green. I filled it with books, a blanket I crocheted over winter, and a tiny vase that always held fresh flowers, even if they were just clippings from the yard. Marisol helped me hang wind chimes outside the kitchen window. Her son painted a little wooden sign for the garden that read, "Abuela's Corner." I kept it there even when the paint began to fade in the sun. My daughter remained distant. The only word she'd sent since her note was a single short reply to a birthday card I had mailed her thanks. No punctuation, no warmth. I didn't try to change it, because something had shifted in me too. I no longer wanted to chase down a version of her that had already let go of my hand. It doesn't mean I stopped loving her. A mother doesn't stop loving, but she can stop waiting. One evening, I sat outside watching the sun set behind the rooftops when a neighbor I hadn't seen in years wandered over. "You're glowing lately," she said. "What changed?" I looked at the sky. The clouds were tinted orange and violet like someone had taken a brush to them. "I started living like my time mattered," I said. She nodded. "I hope I do that one day." "You can," I said. "You just have to stop asking for permission." And that was it. I didn't need my daughter's understanding anymore. I needed my own. She called once. It rang 4 times. I answered. Her voice was hesitant. "I saw your photo. The beach one. Yes, you look different." "Older," I said with a small laugh. "No, stronger." We didn't talk long. She didn't say sorry. I didn't expect her to. But after we hung up, I sat very still and let myself feel what had shifted. Not a reunion. Not a repair. But maybe the beginning of a reckoning. I left the letter on the mantel. It would wait for her, but I wouldn't. If you were me, would you let one photo be enough to open the door again? Or would you stand where you are now on your own 2 feet, facing the ocean unafraid to be alone? It wasn't the letter that brought her back. It was a friend of hers, apparently. A woman I barely knew who had once come to a birthday party here when they were in middle school. She saw a post Marisol shared a picture of the garden with the caption, "Grateful to be where we're wanted." My daughter called the next morning. "No, hello. Just, are you seriously parading this online now? Giving strangers the impression you replaced me." I was in the middle of slicing apples for a pie. I put the knife down carefully and said, "You're not a stranger, but you've made yourself a distant one." She hissed through the line. "You're unbelievable." "I think I finally am," I said, and a smile ghosted across my lips, not from cruelty but clarity. She arrived at the house an hour later. The way she banged the car door shut told me everything about the kind of storm she was bringing with her. Marisol and her son were out running errands, thank goodness. I didn't want her kindness swept up in this whirlwind. She stomped into the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes flashing. "I want to see the paperwork. I want to see proof that you actually did this." I pointed to the folder on the counter. "Neat. Prepared. Final." She flipped it open, scanned quickly, and then slammed it shut. "You gave her everything." "No," I said. I gave her a home. I gave you years. She stared at me like I had struck her. You're choosing her over your own blood. No, I replied calmly. I'm choosing peace. You left a long time ago, you just didn't pack a suitcase. She's your housekeeper. No, I said again. She's my friend. She's someone who sees me. Her voice rose. She played you. Her kid played you. You're too old to see it. There it was, that old dagger. Still sharp, still casual. But I didn't flinch this time. I stepped forward slowly. Do you know what hurts more than being forgotten? Being laughed at. Being mocked. Being treated like a burden by the one person you gave your life to. Her mouth opened, but I raised a hand. I held your hand when you were sick. I braided your hair every morning until you learned how to do it yourself. I worked overtime for years to buy you that car you totaled, without saying thank you. I was there when no one else was. And when I needed kindness back, all I got was jokes about being ancient and useless. She looked away. I am not bitter, I said. I'm just done pretending that love without respect is enough. She sat down heavily in a chair. Her voice was smaller now. I didn't mean to make you feel like that, but you did. She looked around the kitchen at the tea kettle on the stove, the pie crust waiting on the counter, the framed photo of her at age 7 still clinging to the wall like a leaf in winter. I just thought this place would always be mine, that it would wait for me. It did wait, I said. I did, but you didn't come back. Silence sat between us, no longer cold, just exhausted. She rubbed her temples. I thought we had time. So did I. She looked at me with eyes that finally seemed unsure. Is there any way to fix this? I walked to the drawer and pulled out the letter, the one I had rewritten, folded, sealed with quiet love. I placed it in front of her. This is for you, I said. Not now. When you're ready. She reached for it with hesitant hands. And if I never am, she asked, then you'll never know what it says. But it won't change the truth. I turned back to my apples, the kitchen filled with the soft rhythm of the knife, again the light pouring through the window like forgiveness. She didn't speak after that. She stayed seated for a while, then quietly slipped the envelope into her purse and walked out. No apology, no promise, just a woman who finally realized that love doesn't wait in silence forever. That evening I sat with Marisol and told her everything. She didn't say I told you so. She didn't even comment. She simply poured me tea and said, let's make that pie together tomorrow. Maybe with cinnamon this time. And I nodded, because some things like tenderness shouldn't have to be earned. They should just be there. If you were me, would you let her read that letter and hope it cracks something open? Or would you accept that some hearts only beat for themselves? The seasons shifted quietly. The maple in the front yard shed its leaves in slow spirals, covering the walkway in gold. I didn't rake them right away. I liked the way they looked, scattered, natural, unbothered, belonging to no one. I'd taken to sitting on the porch in the mornings again, wrapped in a knit shawl with a warm mug between my palms. Marisol would wave from the sidewalk as she walked her son to school, and sometimes she'd stop by on her way back to bring fresh bread, or simply sit with me for a while. There was no tension in these moments, no performance, just presence. My daughter hadn't returned since the day of the letter, but the envelope was gone. I noticed it missing a week after she'd stormed out. She hadn't said anything about it. No message, no call. But I knew, and it was enough to know she had taken the truth with her. I didn't check the mail expecting anything anymore. I didn't check my phone with hope or dread. There was a calm that had settled, in the kind that comes not from resolution, but release. The house grew warmer with new laughter. Marisol's son had started calling me Abuela Avi. At first, shyly, then, as naturally as breathing. I kept a drawer stocked with his favorite cookies and let him use the back porch as his art studio. His drawings hung now beside my daughter's childhood finger paintings. Both precious. Both part of my life. I didn't replace her. I expanded. There's a difference. I started a new habit, writing letters I didn't intend to send. One to my husband, one to my younger self. One to my daughter on the day she turned 30, which I quietly remembered on my own, baking a single-layer cake that I didn't photograph or share. I wrote, "You were born with my whole heart in your tiny fists." I still feel the phantom ache. Then I folded the letter and placed it in a tin box with the others. One afternoon, Marisol brought her mother to visit. An older woman with eyes like stone, polished by years, strong, weathered kind. She held my hand in both of hers and said, "Thank you for seeing my family." I almost cried. Because what she didn't know was that they'd helped me see myself again. I hadn't felt this alive in years. I took up painting. Not for art, but for peace. I hung a few pieces around the house. One in the hallway where the photos of my daughter used to be. Not out of bitterness, but because I had made space for something new. People think peace arrives like a trumpet blast, loud, undeniable, certain. But peace crept in for me like light under a closed door. Quiet, persistent, soft. Sometimes I'd wake in the night and stare at the ceiling, still expecting pain to curl up beside me like an old cat. But more and more, all I felt was space, stillness, the absence of sorrow, and I didn't miss it. One evening, as Marisol and her son helped me put up holiday lights, I heard laughter spilling from the front yard. It wasn't forced. It wasn't edited to please. It was real. This house I once feared would sit empty was full again. Different voices, new rhythms, but full. My daughter might come back someday, or she might not. But if she does, she won't return to a mother waiting in dim corners, aching for scraps of attention. She'll return to a woman who healed. And if she reads that letter, really reads it, she'll understand that I never stopped loving her. I just stopped erasing myself to keep her comfortable. If you were me, would you miss the version of her that never returned? Or would you I have choose the present, the joy, the calm, the life that blooms even after you've been cut back? The days are longer now. Or maybe I just notice them more. In the stillness of early evening, when the house is quiet and the sun rests low on the horizon, I find myself standing at the window, not out of longing but reflection. The wind rustles through the trees. With a softness, I've come to understand that not everything loud is true, and not everything quiet is absence. I light candles before bed. Not out of habit, but reverence. This life, my life, is worth honoring. Every wrinkle, every scar, every silent goodbye. I've learned to live without needing permission. To give my love where it's cherished. To rest when I'm tired. To speak when I'm ready. And most of all, to let go when holding on becomes the heaviest thing in the room. The house is still mine, even as I slowly pass its love into other hands. Its memories breathe with me now, not behind me but beside me, and my daughter. She exists somewhere out there, holding a letter with my handwriting, reading words I never dared say aloud while I was begging to be heard. Maybe one day she'll hear them. Maybe not. But either way, I have made peace with the not knowing. Because life is not about what we are given. It's about what we choose to keep and what we learn to release. And here, with the windows open and the kettle warming again, I have chosen peace. I have chosen myself. If you were me, what would you do in this situation? Would you wait? Would you reach back? Or would you stand where I am now? Arms open, not in hope, but in grace, and let life arrive, exactly as it is.